Kata samuha loiya sate gela nagara braje.
Kata samuha loiya sate gela nagara braje.
Tathai bajalo kol gana gana tahe jajera ro. Micheni dava shegelore rati divasha sharira saje.
Micheni dava shegelore rati divasha sharira saje.
Emono dulaba manava deho kaya ki koro bhavana keho. Benavajile jasoda suta charame pori belaje.
Benavajile jasoda suta charame pori belaje.
Yudita tapan hoile asta vinogelo boli hoi bevyasta.
Yudita tapan hoile asta
Keno ebe ala sahoy nabajari doya raje.
Keno ebe ala sahoy nabajari doya raje.
Jivanayanta jana hasan tahinana vidha viparaba. Namaskar kari jatane tumi taka hoy apon kaje.
Namaskar kari jatane tumi taka apon kaje.
Jivaya kalyana sadhana kan jagate asiye moduyana. Timira tapana rupe ridga gan viraje.
Timira tapana rupe ridga gan viraje.
Krishna nam shudha kori apan jurao bakati binoda pran.
Krishna nam shudha kori apan jurao bakati binoda pran.
Nam bina kichu nahi koyaro chauda bhuvana maje.
Nam bina kichu nahi koyaro chauda bhuvana maje.
Jeev jago Gaura Chandra bole.
Jeev jago Gaura Chandra bole.
Kotha nidra jao maya pisachi rakole. Bajivo অবিদ্যার ভোরে তোমার লইতে আমি হইনু অবতার আমি বিন বন্ধু হার কে আছে তোমার এনেছে ঔষধি মায়া নাশিবার লাগি হরি নাম মহামন্ত্র লও তুমি মাগি
You again.
Bhakti Vinoda Prabhu Charan Poriya Say Hari Nama Mantra Loilo Magiya আমি হইনু অবতার আমি বিন বন্ধু হার কে আছে তোমার এনেছে ঔষধি মায়া নাশিবার লাগি হরি নাম মহামন্ত্র লও তুমি মাগি Bhakti Vinoda Prabhu Charan Poriya Say Hari Nama Mantra Loilo Magiya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama
Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana
Baby. Baby. I'm still throwing up. From what? He couldn't do a Africa.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, my beloved brothers and sisters. You are welcome to
Right.
our platform today. We
Right.
are pleased to have you. Hare Krishna.
It's a pleasure to be here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Perfect. Thank you. So I put the verse on the screen and we can start the class.
Okay.
Prabhupada already chanted the Radha Madhava, so you just go with the slokas and the rest.
Very good. So should I begin or do you want to?
Yes, Prabhu, you can begin.
I can begin?
Yes.
Okay. Oh. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today, December 31st, 2020, we'll end the year. We're doing from Srimad Bhagavatam, it's the first canto, 5th chapter, text 40. So Tvam apyadabra sruta vishrutam vibho samapyate yena vidam bubu sitam. Prakyahi dukair muhur ardid atmanam sanklesha nirvanam ushanti nanyata. So we go to the synonyms, or
Yes.
people chant, or just go right to synonyms?
Yes, please.
Okay, synonyms. Tvam, your good soul. Api, also. Adabra, vast. Shruta, Vedic literatures. I thought maybe that's why you picked this verse, huh? It's got Shruta. Vishrutam, have heard also. Vibhu, of the Almighty. Samapyate, satisfied. Yena, by which. Vidam, of the learned. Bubusitam, who also desires to learn transcendental knowledge. Prakyahi, describe. Dukhaihi, by miseries. Muhu, always. Ardita atmanam, suffering mass of people. Sanklesha, sufferings. Nirvanam, mitigation. Ushantina, do not get out of. Anyata, by other means. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Please, therefore, describe the Almighty Lord's activities, which you have learned by your vast knowledge of the Vedas, for that will satisfy the hankerings of great learned men, and at the same time mitigate the miseries of the masses of common people, who are always suffering from material pangs. Indeed, there is no other way to get out of such miseries. Purport. Sri Narada Muni, from practical experience, definitely asserts that the prime solution of all problems of material work is to broadcast very widely the transcendental glories of the Supreme Lord. There are 4 classes of good men, and there are 4 classes of bad men also. The 4 classes of good men acknowledge the authority of the Almighty God, and therefore such good men, 1, when they are in difficulty, 2, when they are in need of money, 3, when they are advanced in knowledge, and 4, when they are inquisitive to know more and more about God, intuitively take shelter of the Lord. As such, Narada Ji advises Vyasadeva to broadcast the transcendental knowledge of God in terms of the vast Vedic knowledge which he had already attained. As far as bad men are concerned, there are also 4 in number. 1, those who are simply addicted to the mode of progressive fruit of work and thus are subjected to the accompanying miseries. 2, those who are simply addicted to vicious work for sense gratification and so suffer the consequences. 3, those who are materially very much advanced in knowledge, but who suffer because they don't have the sense to acknowledge the authority of the Almighty Lord. And 4, the class of men who are known as atheists, and who therefore purposely hate the very name of God, although they are always in difficulty. Sri Narada Ji advised Vyasadeva to describe the glories of the Lord just to do good to all 8 classes of men, both good and bad. Srimad Bhagavatam is therefore not meant for any particular class of men or sect. It is for the sincere soul who actually wants his own welfare and peace of mind. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 1st canto, 5th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Narada's Instructions on Srimad Bhagavatam for Vyasadeva. Hare Krishna. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharni Nirvishesa Sanyavari Paschachade Satarni. So, well, first I'd like to thank everyone for arranging this class today. It's for me, it's a great honor to be with all of you. I was just in Africa just before this pandemic started. Some of you may be aware, my wife and I, we went for South Africa. We arrived there. We arrived in Mauritius in December.
How many days do I got left in my band? I can't even like anything.
Do you need to translate or no?
No, we don't need translation,
Oh, okay.
just English.
Okay, very good. So then from January, of course, we were in South Africa. We went to Johannesburg and Sandton and Durban and Cape Town. And then after that,
Where is he?
I muted.
It's okay.
Okay, I'm unmuted. All right, it said I was muted there for a minute. So then after spending a month in South Africa, we spent 2 weeks and we went to Nairobi and Mombasa, Kenya. I was very eager to go to the continent there, to Africa, because I had been with Srila Prabhupada for 1.5 years, well, almost 2.5 years. And I remained in Hawaii when Prabhupada went to Hawaii in June of 1975. I stayed in Hawaii. So at that time, I remained there and Prabhupada continued traveling. And it was just within a few months after that Prabhupada traveled to these very places, Mauritius and South Africa and to Africa. So I had always wanted to go visit anywhere that Srila Prabhupada wanted to. So to go there for me had been a desire I had had for a long time. So I was very eager and very happy to finally get to go there. And little did I know, just after leaving there, we came to Vrindavan, and at that time, then the whole world practically became locked down since then. So it's been almost a year now. But we've been happily here in Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada's given us a wonderful place to stay here. I also see there on Kusha Prabhu, your background there. I believe that's Mount Kilimanjaro, huh?
Yes.
As we were traveling to Mombasa, I believe from Kenya, we passed there. That was also very exciting for us. Whenever I see mountains, I always, of course, think of the Himalayas. I've done some traveling in the Himalayas. So seeing Mount Kilimanjaro, which is, of course, is very great in its own right, was very wonderful to have that opportunity. And what I've seen as we read this verse, of course, in the purport by Srila Prabhupada, he explains very clearly that the only way to mitigate our suffering here in the material world is by hearing about the pastimes of the Supreme Lord and of his devotees. As I said, I was with Prabhupada for almost 2.5 years. And during that time, of course, one of the times I was with him, probably for the longest part of the day, well, we had morning walk was there, the class was there. But then when I was with him personally, with just 1 or 2 others, was during massage time. So that happened right around noontime for about 1.5 hours. And while I was giving him massage, this was the time very often when the secretary would come in. And he would have his stack of letters for Srila Prabhupada. And some of them were from the managers, sannyasis, GBC, temple presidents like that. Prabhupada was always managing. As he was traveling around the world, he was managing the entire society. And some of them, of course, were on a more personal level. There were devotees, his disciples, asking for advice, telling them of their situations. Prabhupada, I always say everything is personal. Prabhupada came, traveled around the world 14 times to teach us personalism. Krishna is a person, just like we're a person. Krishna is a supreme person. And he very much, his mission was to teach us his personalism, that we're all persons and we're all servants, we're all children of the Supreme Lord. And what I saw in so many of these letters, and what would happen during the massage, is I would be giving massage. Much of the massage, almost half of it, I was right behind Srila Prabhupada, because massage started out with the head, massaging Prabhupada's head. And everything, you were always learning. When you were with Prabhupada, it was always an opportunity to learn. So massaging his head, Prabhupada took sandalwood oil. So if you're familiar with sandalwood oil, if you understand a little of Ayurveda, you know, sandalwood oil, different oils, they all have attributes, different attributes. So they're used for different things. So sandalwood oil is cooling, which Prabhupada, of course, said, keep a cool head. Right? You would use sandalwood oil on the head because you want to keep a cool head, he said. Then the rest of the body, he would use mustard oil. And he said this massage, it was one of three things. He said that kept him alive. He said he was kept alive by three things. One was his massage. The other was his morning walk, which when Prabhupada took a morning walk, which is also about the same amount of time, about 1.5 hours, he took a very, we would say, brisk walk. It wasn't a stroll. Prabhupada walked very deliberately and very quickly. So he said that, massage, his morning walk, and then he said his Ayurvedic medicine. He said those things kept him alive. Ayurvedic medicine, he just took one. There was one medicine he took. Prabhupada said Ayurvedic medicine is meant for preventative. It's a preventative medicine, not so much a curative medicine, but it's prevent. So he took one medicine, Yogendra Ras, which he only took every other day. And this Yogendra Ras had powdered pearl, and apparently, and it was supposed to, if you get good, it also had gold dust and pearl dust in it. So anyway, these were the medicines he took. So his massage, while he was getting massage for this 1.5 hours, he didn't just get a massage. His secretary would come in, again with letters, and he would read the letters to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada, as he was getting his massage, he would dictate answers to these letters. And also, in between, sometimes the Sanskrit editor would come in, because we know Prabhupada very early in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, this is when Prabhupada did this translating work. Just like today, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada gave us all these translations and purports. It was done very early in the morning while everyone else, wherever he was, we were taking rest until maybe 4 o'clock in the morning or so, some even later. But this is when Prabhupada would do Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita. We know these hours, they're very, very special hours, and energy, the atmosphere is very clear. So Prabhupada did his translating work then. So at noontime, during massage, also the Sanskrit editor would come in if he had any questions, as he would listen to the previous night's translation, and he would see the word for word, just like here, you see all the words. I was looking, since of course my name is Srutakirti. Prabhupada, here he translates Shruta, he says Vedic literatures. So this is the art of the devotee, is understanding how to translate each and every word, and how to put the verse, the translation, and to be done as in a devotional way. This is what Prabhupada was so expert at. When he gave me initiation, I remember it was 1971, July of 1971. So he was, every day he was initiating 10 devotees. This was in New York City. So he did this for about a week. So each day he would chant on the japa beads of each person, and one at a time we would come up. So when I came up, and we would have to say our vows. So he would always ask, what are the regulative principles? So then we would recite the regulative principles. And then to me, he said, in how many rounds do you chant? Sometimes he would say, you must chant 16 rounds, but to me it was a question, how many rounds do you chant? So I said, oh, I'm chanting 20 rounds, Srila Prabhupada. And he just looked at me and went, Immediately there was that taking and hitting you on the head, that pride, whatever little pride was there. This is duty of the guru, the spiritual master, is to take that pride and teach us humility. So he wasn't impressed with this idea that I was chanting 20 rounds. So then he said, your name is Srutakirti. Now this is 1971. So for me, this was a name, I was just in the temple now for literally 3 months. So I'd never even heard this name before. And then he said, Srutakirti, he said, is the name of Krishna. And he said, and it means one whose activities are world famous. So later on, by somehow Krishna's mercy, I became his servant. And there was one day I was with Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Some of you may have heard of Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Of course, he was Prabhupada's secretary, especially during the last year Prabhupada was with us. And one of the GBCs, early sannyasi, and did so much service. I started the Radha Damodar party. So there was one day I was Prabhupada's servant. It was just for a month, and we were in India. And we were staying at this place by the sea in Mumbai, Bombay. We're staying at a Kartikeya's house, Mahadevya. So the flat Prabhupada was staying in was on the 3rd floor. So now this is in India, in Mumbai, 1972. And there was a little elevator, very small elevator that went up and down. It went up and down very slowly as well. And it was so small, you could barely fit 2 people in it. So I had been Prabhupada's servant now for a few months. And Prabhupada was leaving his room to go on the morning walk. So I came out of the room with Prabhupada to the elevator. So next to Prabhupada and myself was Tamal Krishna Maharaj, GBC, sannyasi of Prabhupada's. So we pushed a button. So when the elevator door opened, Prabhupada walked in. And I also tried to walk in. I thought I was going to be with Prabhupada going down. And Maharaj, he just pushed me out of the way. You're not using the elevator. He just pushed me. So he got into the elevator with Prabhupada. So then the elevator went down to the ground floor. And as it's going down to the ground floor, I just started running down the stairs. It was around the elevator. So when I got to the bottom, I got there before the elevator had gotten there. So then the elevator door opened onto the ground floor, and Prabhupada was getting out of the elevator, and I extended my hand. And Tamal Krishna, who's in the elevator, says, Prabhupada, Srutakirti, he's already here. And Prabhupada just looked and he said, Kirti means expert. So then I got out of the elevator and I was feeling very happy. But what we see is the pure devotee, and his ability to take each word. This was the wonderful thing that Prabhupada gave us. As he said, he gave us Bhagavad Gita as it is. This as it is, it means Prabhupada understood as a pure devotee of Krishna, he was able to take these verses from Bhagavad Gita, from Srimad Bhagavatam, and give it to us in a pure devotional way. And that way is to, whatever he was doing, it was always to encourage us in this process of devotional service, and always to show us Krishna's greatness. So I was saying during massage, when I would massage Srila Prabhupada, sometimes these letters, they would be read by the secretary. And sometimes devotees, they would write Prabhupada and they would begin to tell him about difficulties that they were having. Maybe it was a marriage problem or difficulties with some other devotee. They would say how they were struggling in their Krishna consciousness. And they would write Prabhupada looking for some answers, looking for some relief. And I got to see over the course of months and years, Prabhupada never gave a materialistic response. He never tried to solve any problem materially. He would always encourage, he would say, chant your rounds, make sure you're chanting your 16 rounds, following the regulative principles, read my books, and engage in service. And while I was with Prabhupada over 2 years, I got to see this again and again and again. As a spiritual master, as pure devotee, he never deviated from the formula that he gave us. If we wanted to solve any problem, and this is what he's saying here in the purport, whatever there is, wherever we come, the answer to all of our problems, the answer to all difficulties, it's always the same, is devotional service. It's to absorb ourselves in the Shastra, to understand Krishna. Our process, of course, ultimately, we want to develop love of Krishna. And Prabhupada say, in order to love someone, you have to know about them. So the more you know about a person, the more possible it is to develop this love. So this was always Prabhupada's solution, because all of our problems, whatever they may be, big problem, small problem, within this world, there is no material solution. That is just transferring from one, like we say, from one shoulder to the next. So for me, being with Prabhupada, he always reinforced this situation, that if we want to resolve whatever difficulty is there, we would have to take to Krishna consciousness. So I was very happy, and I've always tried to understand that whatever there is, we take it as Krishna's mercy. Maharaj, very nice to see you. Hare Krishna. We miss you here in Vrindavan.
Yes.
Yes. And ultimately, this is for us here in Vrindavan, and also we can see the same thing even here in Vrindavan. Just like now, winter has set in. This morning we didn't get much sun. We have the fog, how the winter fog of Vrindavan has come in. It was during Guru Puja, it was 3 degrees Celsius this morning. So one who has spent some time here in Vrindavan, you know, the winters, they can be very challenging here because there's no real source of heat in the rooms. You have these very thick brick walls, 1/2 meter thick, and they just gradually, as the weeks go by, it gets colder. These walls get colder and colder and colder. So even whatever little heat you have, there's always that coldness is there. But to be in Vrindavan, we also understand is most wonderful thing. At this time of my life, I'm very happy that Prabhupada's given us shelter here at his Krishna Balaram Mandir. So let me see here. So Prabhupada also, someone asked me last week, and I had never been asked a question before. I was talking about being with Prabhupada, and they asked me how many times did I massage Srila Prabhupada? I did a little investigating, and I tried to see the times I was with him. So being with Prabhupada, I was very fortunate. So I was with him approximately 800 days. So of those days, there were certain things, and Prabhupada demanded, when you were with him, Prabhupada understand no matter how fallen we may have been, just to have that association was purifying, and hopefully some of it would wear off in the course of time. I remember when I was writing my book, which eventually became the title, What is the Difficulty? I see picture here on the screen, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. And I had asked him if he could write something, a foreword or preface to my book. And this was he was in his final months at this time. And he wrote a couple pages introducing the book, talking about my service and things. And somehow or other, it got erased. He wrote me and said, I have written all this, he said, but he said it got lost on the computer. So if you do see a copy of my book, you'll see he wrote a few paragraphs. He wrote something again, and he said, I just don't have, he said at this time, he said, I just don't even have the energy, he said, to try and do something. And he wrote a little bit. And one of the things he said so many things, Maharaj is so wonderful. He said, when one is given much, he said, then much is expected. And that's what I saw with Srila Prabhupada. There was no question of missing Prabhupada's class. If you were in his entourage, you were traveling with him. He is sitting in the Vyasasan, and you better be no more than 5 feet away from him, sitting on the floor, listening to his class. When he was on the morning walk, he knew he would speak on the morning walk many times. Sometimes he would chant japa, sometimes he was speaking. But he expected those who were with him to be there, not just because they got a morning walk, but to hear. Hearing is the basis of everything we do. We get to hear from Srila Prabhupada. This is how we can develop our faith. This is how our faith can become unshaken. That's what unflinching means, to get unshaken, so that no matter what happens to us, we know we have one shelter. That shelter is Krishna. I remember seeing Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj just weeks before he left. He was staying at Gita Nagari. I was living my wife and I, we were living in Philadelphia, which was just a 3 or 4 hour drive away from the Gita Nagari farm. So I'm not sure whether it was Nrsinga's appearance day. Anyway, it was a festival day, but I wanted to take a drive to see Maharaj. We all knew he was leaving soon. And he called us into his room, his disciples, not his disciples, his godbrothers and godsisters. There were about a dozen of us there that day. And he had done some kirtan, and he talked for a few minutes. His body was of course, at that time, was giving him lots of difficulty, very much pain. But then he went to his room and he called everyone in for darshan. So about a dozen of us, again, we're his godbrothers and sisters, we went into the room. And of course, we were always very happy to see Maharaj. And Maharaj, I remember a god sister, and she was there. And of course, we were all feeling quite emotional seeing Maharaj and being with him. And she just shouted out. She said, "Maharaj, I love you." Only a woman could say in that way. And Maharaj looked at her. He said, "And I love you too." He said, "And now I can say it." He said, "I'm free to say it." He was feeling in that mood. He said, "And I can say it." He said, "I love you too." And then he went on. He said, "I want to tell you a few things." He said, "The first thing is," he said, "his bones, we know his bones." This happened later on to my wife. She had the same kind of cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, yes, which that's the lymph, all the lymph, and it would eat at the bones. So he was in much pain. And he said, "I was in so much pain," he said, "that I forgot Krishna." He said, and then after that happened, I realized that was the greatest pain, not being able to remember Krishna. He said that was the greatest pain, greater than any material pain. So that was, when you hear these things from somebody, this is what we call realized knowledge, huh? This is something, you don't read it in a book, not even Shastra. This is something you experience very personally. So this was his experience. He said that pain, he said, is the greatest pain. So this is also very important to understand. All these things we go through, all these struggles we go through on personal level and difficulties with other people, even devotees, whether they be managers or friends, whatever it is, all these problems, now we have this virus, this COVID, so many difficulties are there. We see our own people getting sick. Here in Vrindavan, dozens of devotees have had different phases of this disease. Some have died, some get very ill, some get a little ill, but whatever it is, there's nothing that's more painful than forgetting Krishna. So he said that. One of the other things he said was, he said, we should remember, he said, we've all been here a long time. So this was however long ago. So we've all been devotees by that time, almost 40 years. He said, it's important to remember why I came to Krishna consciousness. Because sometimes we've been devotee for a long, long time, and we start to think, what am I doing here? These problems is just like being in the material world. I know even here in Vrindavan, Vrindavan, we know this is Vrindavan. Krishna appears here. This is the spiritual world. But even Prabhupada says it's replica Vrindavan. He said, so still you walk outside, you'll see people, you'll see struggles going on, you'll see animals struggling. You see these threefold miseries are there because is within this world. I remember Prabhupada said to me one day, he said, even Krishna, when he comes to this material world, he's faced with difficulties. Huh? He's being attacked by so many demons. He said, even Krishna has to face this when he comes to this world. What to speak of us? Sometimes devotees, they get this idea that I become a devotee, then all my problems are going to be erased. I won't have any more struggles. Why is Krishna putting me through these things? No, that's not what devotee means. Devotee means, as Prabhupada says, right in this, we're looking at first canto here. In one purport, Prabhupada explains that the pure devotee, he's unaffected by the threefold miseries. Not that those miseries aren't present within this world, they're there. But the devotee understands he's not this body. He's totally unaffected by it. I remember being with Prabhupada. I had lived in Philadelphia in the USA. It's just near New York City, 2 hours away. So I was born and raised there and practically didn't go anywhere until I joined the temple when I was 19 years old, 1971. So then a year later, I became Prabhupada's servant. So within 1 month, I went from New Vrindavan Farm. A month later, I was in India. We arrived in Delhi. And from Delhi, Prabhupada immediately the next day went to Vrindavan. So we stayed in Vrindavan for the month of Kartik. It was the first time since Prabhupada left in 1965. It was the first time he would be in Vrindavan for the whole month of Kartik. And he was very eager to do this. This is when he had the Nectar of Devotion classes, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu classes, and he stayed in his rooms, Radha Damodar Temple. So that was from mid-October to mid-November. So now I've been in India for a month. And I, of course, without any warning, I didn't understand what it was like to be in India in those years, 1972. So we left Vrindavan, and then we were in Hyderabad for 2 weeks. And then we went to Ahmedabad for 2 weeks. And in each place, Prabhupada was doing pandals. Every evening, he would speak in front of 10,000 people. This was India in those times. They were eager to hear. If someone was speaking from Bhagavatam Sapta, people would show up. And Prabhupada was he was very famous now, 1972. He was the guru who conquered America, brought the Hare Krishna mantra to America. But when I was in Ahmedabad, I became very ill. And at the time, I didn't even understand what it was, but I had gotten malaria. And this was not something you contracted in the USA. These diseases, yellow fever, malaria, these things, didn't exist in the USA. But I had gotten so ill. And I remember we were staying at one house, like Life Member's house. And they had given, Prabhupada had his room. I had my own room. But I had gotten so sick and I had very high fever. You get this headache. Just seeing light was just pounding on your head. So anyway, they called a doctor. I believe it was a homeopathic doctor. Remember, I had a little black case he opened up, and all these little bottles, these little clear glass bottles with little white round pills in them. This was my first experience seeing homeopathic medicine. Anyway, within 1-2 days, I started feeling better. And one afternoon, I was very young. I had just turned 20 years old. I've been with Prabhupada now for just 2 months. I was just a devotee, aspiring devotee for 16 months. And Prabhupada went by the room I was at, and I looked at him and I said, Prabhupada, I said, I've never been so sick. I was very healthy all through my youth growing up. Never missed a day of school, 12 years of school, 14 years of school. I think I missed 2 days in 14 years due to illness. Well, I looked at Prabhupada, I said, I've never been sick like this. And Prabhupada, in his very transcendental way, he looked at me and he said, oh, he said, that's very wonderful. He said, the normal condition, he said, in the material world is to be diseased. He said, to be healthy, he said, that's very unusual. And I got to see, even to this day, Prabhupada would say things and you could understand it on many different levels, huh? So he would say this disease, he said, this disease condition, he said, that's normal condition in the material world. So of course, this disease, this is the disease. We think we're this body. and therefore, that's the difference between devotee and non-devotee. Is devotee understands, I'm not this body. That's real devotee. He understands I'm not the body, and therefore he's unaffected. Whatever goes on, he continues with his devotional service. So that statement by Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj saying, you have to remember, he said, every month you should sit down and remember, why did I become a devotee? Because our tendency is we forget these things and we begin to think we're actually suffering. We're suffering as devotee. No, this is not suffering. Suffering is material world. That's real suffering. Like, just like here, I was saying how it was getting cold in Vrindavan. And it was during Kartik, 1972. Prabhupada called me into his room. And he asked, where are the others? I was young, new devotee. I was getting up early in the morning. The others meant his secretary, his Sanskrit editor, who had joined, both had joined in 1967. So this is 1972. So they were senior and they were old devotees, but they also had their own schedule. So they didn't necessarily get up so early. They would get up in time for the morning walk. So Prabhupada rang his bell, 6 in the morning. He said, where are the others? I said, Prabhupada, I said, they're resting. He said, call them. So then I went to the room and Prabhupada wants to see you. This was the first of many, many times when I would have, Prabhupada wants to see you. So then we all went back into Prabhupada's room together, his sitting room, Radha Damodar Temple, like 6 in the morning. Prabhupada, he's ready for his morning walk. This is the beginning of November. It's already chilly. It's getting cold in Vrindavan. And Prabhupada looked at us. And of course, he'd say, why you're sleeping? Something I heard many, many times. Is getting up early in the morning very, very important. So Prabhupada said, why are you sleeping? Of course, you couldn't, there wasn't ever a good reason, a good excuse you could give. So then he said, this getting up early in the morning, he said, getting up for Mangal Artik, he said, taking cold bath, he said, is not an austerity. He said, it's common sense. He said, it's actually good for your health. So this was how Prabhupada saw things. Huh? So all these things, he said, if you do this, he said, if you rise early in the morning, take cold bath, go to Mangal Artik, you chant your rounds, he said, and follow the principles, he said, in 12 years, everything you say will be perfect. And then he would just look at us and say, okay, go, and send us out of the room. The third thing Maharaj told us in that gathering, he was kind of praising at that time what we known as called the Gurukulis, the second generation, the children of his godbrothers and sisters, the children of Prabhupada's disciples. And his observation was, and I've also seen this over the years, at least at that time, we saw that it existed like that. He would say, that they very much appreciate each other and they don't judge one another. One could be very strict devotee, chanting 16 rounds, following the regulative principles. And we know some of the Gurukuli generation, they wouldn't chant japa at all. Many of them, most of them were all attached to kirtan, but some of them didn't like japa because when they were children in Gurukula, they were forced, at a very young age, forced to go to Mangalartik, forced to chant japa in a temple room at 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. So that affected them in such a way that japa would become difficult. But his observation was that they didn't judge one another. And his point was that for us as devotees, this is very important, that we don't judge each other in Krishna consciousness. Huh? And again, it's something I learned in being with Prabhupada. We had a class here the other day. We're on the 10th canto, 3rd chapter now. And it's the prayers of Devaki and Vasudev, Krishna's appearance. And it's talking in some of the purports, it's talking very much about the devotees, being devotees and levels of devotees. And Devaki, she's there in Mathura, Mother Yasoda, she's in Vrindavan. And so all these different rasas were there. So one lady, she was asking question afterward, well, how do we know who is a pure devotee? First she asked, how do we know the difference between devotee and non-devotee? And person giving class, he gave us some nice Shastric answers. And I was sitting there listening too, and I was thinking of Srila Prabhupada. I spent a lot of time with him. As I was saying, 800 massages in the daytime, 800 classes. I sat, maybe absorbed tiny bit, but I would hear Prabhupada saying, there were verses that are in my head, Sanskrit verses, just by hearing Srila Prabhupada repeat them in classes hundreds of times. And Prabhupada described, he made everything very simple, not complicated. This is what's so wonderful when we read his books. So Prabhupada said, devotee means one who accepts Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's to be considered a devotee. That was the simple answer. If one accepts Krishna, he's a devotee. Of course, we know as students, as disciples, and he would say disciple means discipline. That's very much a different thing. We follow 4 regulative principles, we chant 16 rounds. That's a discipline, one who's very serious to make progress in spiritual life. But on the simplest level, being devotee, just to accept Krishna. And this is what we're seeing here. However one comes, good person, bad person, our business is to convince them somehow or other, through speaking, through Prabhupada's books, through the classes, Krishna, he's Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we're servants. This is our business, to serve Krishna. And if we do that, then we become happy. Then she said, well, how do we know who is pure devotee? And of course, he gave an answer, different level of devotees. We know there's devotee this level, this level, this level. But again, I was remembering, and those of you, some of you might have read my book. In my book, there's one letter in my book of Srila Prabhupada that he writes devotee. The devotee's name was Tushta Krishna Maharaj. He was Prabhupada's disciple. And before coming, he was disciple of Siddha Swarup. Maybe a few of you know of Siddha Swarup. He came, he was already practicing Kundalini Yogi. So he had some powers. He had over 100 followers. So they all came. He brought them all to Prabhupada when he came. But over the course of time, this was in 72, 73, 74, they were very attached to Siddha Swarup. And they saw him as being very special and pure devotee. So this one devotee, he wrote Prabhupada. Again, he wrote Prabhupada a letter. If you wrote Prabhupada a letter, you got an answer. And in this letter, he asked Prabhupada approximately 10 questions. And Prabhupada was very wonderful how he did things. He didn't pick and choose which question he would answer. This is most important question. This is less. He answered the questions in the order that they were asked. So Prabhupada was amazing. He was wonderful to be with, to see how he dealt with every situation. But he said to him, you see this devotee, he said, as pure devotee. He said, but I think you have the wrong understanding. He said, yes, the Siddha Swarup, he said, he's a pure devotee. He said, but others are also pure devotees. He said, Shama Sundar, he's pure devotee. And he started mentioning, this person is pure devotee. He said, anyone. He said, all of my disciples who are sincerely serving, they're all pure devotees. So again, Prabhupada gave us a very wonderful way of how to see others as devotees and how not to make judgment, just like Maharaj was making that statement about the Gurukulis. He said they didn't look to judge others. They just appreciated having friendships with other devotees. So this is another thing I learned being with Srila Prabhupada. Our business is not to see who's on this level, who's here, who's there. Our business is to serve the spiritual master, try to serve his mission. We do understand, as it's mentioned in Nectar of Instruction, to understand devotees, whether one's Kanishta, Madhyama, and how to deal with them. But it's not how to ignore people. It's how to deal with everyone so that we can encourage others in their Krishna consciousness, or that we can take association from more advanced devotees so that we become encouraged in our Krishna consciousness. But the main thing that I saw with Srila Prabhupada, and I saw with these very wonderful devotees like Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, is they understood that Prabhupada's society, his ISKCON society, was one very, very big family. And whatever the situation is, it's to learn how to deal with other as family members, to always be trying to help in whatever way we could. And that help is, as I saw in Prabhupada answering these letters, is somehow or other, you have to understand how to give Krishna, because it's the answer to all of our problems is always Krishna consciousness. So even if that means just being friendly to someone, they see you're a devotee. And I saw Prabhupada was also expert at this. He would have people coming from the outside. I saw Bhaktivedanta Manor when the race car driver came. He was the winner of Le Mans. I forget his name. Prabhupada talked to him about combustion engine. For 20 minutes, Prabhupada is all he talked about was a car engine. Does this mean Prabhupada had a mundane conversation? No, it meant that Prabhupada was just getting this person to appreciate a devotee. And just by him appreciating Prabhupada, this man made progress in Krishna consciousness. So in every situation, we have to understand who we're dealing with and how to deal with them in a way so that we help ourselves and we help them in Krishna consciousness. So this is the last day of this year. Of course, again, as devotees, I remember being with Prabhupada. We had no Christmas celebrations. We had no New Year celebrations. My birthday came and went. He never said happy birthday, Shruta. These things didn't exist in ISKCON in those days. As Prabhupada said, every day is New Year's for a devotee. But we can also take the opportunity, if it helps others, then we also utilize it in that way. But for us, every day is New Year. I really enjoy being here in Vrindavan. Christmas came and went. Never heard a word. Didn't see one Christmas light. I'm from USA. I heard people light their house up, put up their trees, do so. Not here in Vrindavan. Here in Vrindavan, it's just Radhe Radhe, Hare Krishna. So this is our business, everything about Krishna. So I'm not sure how long we go here. I see it's in just about an hour. We can continue, or if there's questions or comments. Maharaj, if you had something to add to help, you could say a few words, or if anyone has any questions, you just tell me how to continue.
Thank you, Prabhu, for your wonderful class. Maharaj will speak. We have some questions.
Okay, good.
Like in the paper, Prabhupada mentioned 4 classes of people who are bad and who are good.
Yes.
My question is on the bad people. Number 3. He said those who are materially very much advanced in knowledge, but who suffer because they do not have the sense of knowledge of the Almighty. So my question is, they are materially advanced in knowledge. Why do Prabhupada consider them as being unfortunate? Like now we have the viruses. The scientists are finding vaccine and doctors are treating devotees. They are using their materially advanced knowledge to help heal the world and heal devotees. Why do Prabhupada classify them as bad?
Yes, because they use this knowledge actually to deny Krishna. Prabhupada would say, no matter what there is, he said, that's what's wrong in the material world. He said, your foundation is wrong. He said, so whatever you put on top of it, it doesn't matter how much wonderful it is. The foundation is there is no God. This is their conclusion with their advancement of knowledge, is that life comes from matter. We know I was on so many walks in Los Angeles, Venice Beach with Srila Prabhupada, and he enjoyed so much talking to Swarup Damodar, our big scientist, Swarup Damodar, who would argue these materialistic, these scientific ways. And Prabhupada would always talk about post-dated check. I just saw again, I saw an article just the other day saying they've come to understand now, if they can give so much oxygenated something or other into the body, they can stop old age. So you would say these kind of things to Prabhupada, he would just laugh. Yes, he said, post-dated check. And that's what they constantly do. They're always giving this false hope, how they're going to cure. Look at our situation now. In America with this disease, there are over 300 people have died by their calculations, and they're saying it'll be 500,000 within the next few months. So they can't cure anything. They're always saying they're going to cure, just like now they've provided, now the big thing is these vaccinations are coming. They've had vaccinations for the flu for 30, 40 years. Every year they vaccinate people. Flu is there every year. So they can't cure anything. So they're using this knowledge, but they're not using it in the right way. This is their misfortune. He says, what do you say? Materially very much advanced in knowledge, but suffer because they don't have the sense of knowledge, the authority of the Almighty Lord, to acknowledge the authority of the Almighty Lord. So even though they have so much knowledge, is all they use it to is deny the Supreme Personality. So that's a big misfortune. And because they're advanced in knowledge and they're seen as authorities, they misguide others. This was when Prabhupada, he would go, we saw in Europe, while I was with him, he went to see Cardinal Danielou And in Paris, he also went to visit the mayor of Paris. He saw the governor. And he would always say, your duty is to instruct. You're a leader. So as a leader, he said, your duty is to instruct others about the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if you don't do that, you're misusing your authority, your so-called intelligence, your materialistic knowledge. He would say, what you use it for what? He said, just like you have an electric light, so electric, all these things. He said, so you use all this knowledge. He said, instead of just here in India, to this day, they still do it. They'll light a candle just on oil. What kind of oil? Till oil. What's it called? Yeah. Anyway, just simple thing. So you have bright, bright light instead of just a very small light, and using your time for Krishna, using your time like they did in the old days to hear from Mahabharata, to hear from Ramayana. These things all disappeared in India as well. When I came with Prabhupada in 72, it was still very much prevalent. Like I said, Prabhupada would have a pandal, 10 to 20,000 people would show up with very little advertisement. But today, that's not their interest here in India either. They want to become material advanced. So this is very sinful activity. And this is the unfortunate situation of those with their so-called material advancement.
Thank you, Maharaj. Our next question is from Sahadev Prabhu. Sahadev, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
My humble obeisances to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us this morning.
Thank you.
I met you personally in Nagri, but I was just too little, so I couldn't get much closer to you. But when Bhaktita Maharaj was about to leave the planet, Nagri became like Namisharanya. We were receiving lots of amazing devotees almost every day. I've also been following you somehow on YouTube, and I've been listening to some of your classes and memories of Srila Prabhupada. I love listening to Srila Prabhupada's memories. And my question to you, Prabhuji, is we see like in material life, two people go to Yale University. They all pass. They all take the same course. They all pass. They come out. One gets a job with a degree. One does not get a job with a degree. So like in spiritual life, it isn't like somebody isn't really serious to following the principles. Someone is really serious, yet he is unable to make a headway. He's unable to move on. Sometimes I listen to you and Brahmananda Prabhu talking about the origin of bloop, you know, and
Yes.
this devotee bloop. So what makes somebody, even though willingly he is trying his best to serve Guru and Krishna, yet he falls away, and someone externally may not seem to be trying so extraordinarily, yet he makes a headway. What brings about such a difference? Hare Krishna.
Desire.
That's a good question. I'll tell you a few things. I was with Prabhupada literally for 2 days. First day as his servant, we were in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, just by New Vrindavan. The next day we were in Dallas, Texas. Dallas, Texas was the same temple is still there, Radha Kalachandji, very big marble deity, Kalachandji. And this was literally my first full morning walk with Srila Prabhupada. And I had a little bit of, see, this is one thing. Of course, we all come into this world from previous life, whatever happened in our previous life. Some things seem very easy for some, and for others, it seems impossible. The same thing, some could find very easy, others seem impossible for. So I've always been very like an observer, always watching things. It also helped in me being, I think, a fairly good at being personal servant. I like to take care of Prabhupada, and I would see what was needed, you know, very quickly. I would see what others were doing, what they weren't doing, what I should do. I learned right away, if Prabhupada asked a question, I'm not going to try to answer. Because whatever your answer is, he's going to tell you you're wrong. This is one of the things I saw with Prabhupada. Anyway, on the morning walk, it was a time when whoever went on that walk, it might be the only time they ever get to be with Prabhupada personally. Huh? Very intimate. Morning walk was very intimate time. Prabhupada may chant japa. He might talk a little philosophy, could talk about anything, but you're there with him. So these were rare opportunities. Huh? Now we can see how rare these opportunities were. So I could see there was a young, just like me, it was a young brahmachari. He's on the morning walk. And he just wants to ask Prabhupada a question. Not that he wanted to ask him a question, but he wanted to ask him a question just so he could have that personal association with Prabhupada, that intimacy with Srila Prabhupada. But doing so was also, it could be dangerous because you don't know how Prabhupada is going to answer. And it also required some, what's the word? You know, yeah, guts. Thank you. My wife's requires some guts. In many words, we could say it would require, courage. But we'll use that word. Yeah, a little courage to ask, because it's Prabhupada, not just another devotee. He's from the spiritual world. You know, this is probably, he's emissary here from the spiritual world. He's pure devotee. So people would be afraid. So I saw that he couldn't even ask the question, even though he wanted to. He wanted to find that moment, but it didn't happen for an hour on the morning walk. So finally the walk is over. We walk back to the car. And my business, as Prabhupada's servant, I open the door of the car. Prabhupada gets into the car in the back seat. He would sit in the back seat. Now I'm just about to close the door. And as I'm about to close the door, finally that devotee's standing there and he sees my chances are all gone. I ask now or never, it's over. So he shouts, Prabhupada. He said, how do I become Krishna conscious? This was a very interesting question, right? This is all Prabhupada tells us, everything, every class, every book, every conversation, how to become Krishna conscious. But he just wanted to say something to Prabhupada. So he said, how do I become Krishna conscious? And I'm standing there holding the door. Prabhupada's, the driver's ready to drive away. And Prabhupada looked at him and he said one word. And then he looked forward, which meant he was finished. This I already understood. Prabhupada is, all you had to do is watch him and you would know what you're supposed to do. So he said one word and then he looked forward. I shut the door, went around to the other side, got in the car and we left. So Prabhupada told him what it required to become Krishna conscious in one word. So what's that word? Yeah. Wasn't chanting. Chanting can mean anything. You could chant, we could chant water, water, water. It wasn't chanting. Wasn't Krishna. That's not even. What's the one word? How do we become Krishna conscious? He said, desire. Huh? We're filled with desires. You know, you see one person, you see this we all have a desire. We're all in the temple, we're all practicing, coming to the temple, chanting, wearing tilak, chanting rounds, trying to do little service. Why? We have a desire to be Krishna conscious. But how many other desires do we have that inhibit that ability, that surrender to just want to serve Krishna and nothing else? So this whole process is to gradually chip away all these other desires till hopefully we get to that spot where we don't want anything else but to be Krishna conscious, to be with Krishna. Nothing else will satisfy us. Huh? In the class yesterday, the day before, the devotee was saying, even Lakshmi Narayan, Lakshmi also has desire to be with Krishna in Vrindavan, but she also likes being Lakshmi. So because this other desire is there, the devotees in Vrindavan, they don't want anything. They don't care about anything. They don't want any opulence. They don't want anything. They just want to be with Krishna. When I first was with Prabhupada, before I even became his servant, I was literally in the temple for a year. It was the first time I got personal association with him in his garden in Los Angeles. One of the first things he said to me, I was reading Krishna book to him. Somehow or other, I became the Krishna book reader every afternoon for a week. So I'm sitting there with the Krishna book, and he looked at me and said, I like the cowherd boys very much. Each day I was reading Krishna book. So one day we go in, there's just 5 of us in his garden with him in Los Angeles. And he looked and he said, Govinda Mari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. He said, we're servants of Krishna. He said, everyone is serving their wives, their children, serving their boss, serving their dog. He said, but we're servants of Krishna. Govinda Mari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. He said, that's our pride. And Prabhupada always sat very straight, sitting on the asana, always sitting very straight, very erect, cross-legged. He said, that's our pride. We're servants of Krishna. And then he smiled. He looked at me. He said, we don't care. Krishna may be God, or maybe he's not God. He said, we don't care. We just love Krishna. I had been around for a year. I just found out he was God. And now he's already telling me, we don't care if he's God. We just love this person so much. We just want to be with him all the time. So that's Goloka Vrindavan. They have no desire other than to be with Krishna all the time, to serve Krishna, to eat Krishna's prasadam, play with him, sit on his shoulders. This is Braj Leela. This is what Prabhupada's giving us. So this is what we want. And then 2 years later, I was his servant. It was 3 years later, and he was in his room in Atlanta, and I was giving him massage in the evening. And while I was giving him massage in his bedroom, he's looking at a big painting of Krishna and Balaram, young boys with, you could see cowherd boys, a lot of calves. And Prabhupada was just looking at the painting as I'm massaging him. And for the second time, he said to me, I like the cowherd boys very much. And then he started telling a story as I'm massaging him. And it's dark in the room. You can barely see. This was evening time. And he said, every day, he said, Krishna Balaram, with the cowherd boys, they would go into the forest. He said, and they would herd the calves. He said they were just little boys then, which means they were just like 5 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old. He said they were herding the calves, not the cows. He said, so they would go there for the day. He said, and before they went, their mothers, they would make tiffins. give them their lunch, because they would be there in the forest with their lunches all day. So Krishna's lunch, of course, he said, was very nice. Kachori, laglu, puri, halava. And the cowherd boys, their lunches were more simple. The other cowherd boys, chapatis, rice, all like that. He said, so then they would go and play. He said, then when they got hungry, as lunch would come, he said they would steal Krishna's lunch and pass it around. He says, and then they would eat from Krishna's lunch, and he would eat from their lunches. All this whole time, I'm rubbing his legs, rubbing his feet, and he's just speaking. He's not just speaking, he's just there. And then again, he said, I just want to go back to the spiritual world and eat kachori and lagdu with Krishna. And then he didn't say anything else. So this is the desire. When you have that desire, no other desire, you don't care how he makes you live in this material world. You have a beautiful place, a very simple place, little room, no car, big car. None of these things matter. So we all have to get to that point. We can do it, Prabhupada said, like that in a moment, or we can spend lifetimes being distracted. So Krishna consciousness, he said, is easy. Determination, difficult. So we need that. The material world has so many distractions. This is also, this is Maya Devi, this is her service, to distract us. So, but devotee, we take to the Shastra, we chant our rounds, we engage in devotional service, and the process gradually, these things, they can fall away. Prabhupada said, our process is not one of negating, giving up. No, our process is one of serving Krishna. Then we'll lose our taste for material things.
Thank you, Prabhu. We have a question from George Omega.
Yes.
George Omega.
Hello, I'm here. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Go on.
Prabhu, my question has to do with the question someone asked me yesterday. Just yesterday, the Argentinians.
The line is cutting.
Yes.
As anti-abortion law yesterday. I mean the Argentinians. Okay, I have to write it down.
Yes, write it down, please. It's better. So any other question somebody has, we can take from someone else. George will write down his question.
Okay.
Maharaj, if you would like to speak something. But we have one more question on the purport of Prabhupada, where he mentioned that the fortunate people, they know God when they are in difficulties or when they need money.
Yes.
So if people are fortunate when they need money, they remember God. Why do we somehow preach about not being so much attached to material activities like businesses when we are devotees? We are kind of discouraged devotees from doing business to only think of devotional service. But here, number two, people who are fortunate, Prabhupada say when they are in need of money, they go to Krishna. So why did Prabhupada engage them in among the good people and not among the bad people?
Yeah. Well, that's what he said, these four classes of good men. It's understanding God is there. That's accepting the fact that there is a God. That, of course, is much better than thinking there is no God. So even one is going, just like here, even here in Vrindavan, people come to Vrindavan, they see the deities, they're all asking for something. They're not coming here to surrender to Krishna. They're coming to ask God to fulfill their material desires. They'll come tonight, tomorrow, New Year's Day. They're going to come, please give us a prosperous year so that my business does very well. So that's not pure, but at least it's accepting that Krishna is there to go to the source. So that, as it's explained in Bhagavad Gita, whatever it is you want, Krishna says, come to me, because gradually that will become purified. And as that's how I started out saying, Prabhupada answered very easily. Devotee is someone who accepts Krishna's Supreme Personality of Godhead. That person's a devotee. But of course, that's very beginning stage. I came to Krishna consciousness 1971 because I was unhappy. I was miserable. One day I felt happy, and all of a sudden my life just turned around just like that, where I felt like, what is the use of anything? Why am I going to school? Why am I doing that? Everything, I just became miserable. But based on whatever, based on my upbringing, based on perhaps previous life, I started praying to God. I didn't know God was there, not there. That was my prayer. If you're there, do something. I'm miserable here and I want to escape my misery. That's certainly not pure. Prabhupada would often quote, give us this day our daily bread. This is not the business of devotee. In one sense, we can say it is. He's turning to God at least, saying, give us our daily bread. But this is not, we understand as devotional service. Devotee just wants to serve Krishna. But that's an advanced stage. Prabhupada, one thing that impressed me that I got to see over time, Prabhupada never asked for anything for himself. Even when his servant left him, Prabhupada didn't arrange who was going to be his servant. Whatever Krishna did, that was okay. If he provided him a servant, he had a servant. If not, he just managed somehow. Whoever was around would do the cooking. Whoever was around, he'd say, come give me massage. This was not the best way. But Prabhupada this is devotee. He doesn't ask for anything. In fact, he's against asking Krishna for anything other than, as Prabhupada said, I only ask, my only question to my spiritual master, how can I serve you? So that's again, this is an advanced level of Krishna consciousness. One day, Prabhupada called me into his room. This was in Los Angeles. He rang the bell, as he did thousands of times. I went in, offered obeisances. I sat up and he just looked at me. He said, we're not so advanced. He said that we think I want to come back here life after life and do service. He said, we have the desire, we want to go back home, back to Godhead. He said, that desire is there. He said, we're not so advanced. Of course, he's saying to me, you're not so advanced. Our first desire is we want to get out of here. But that's the process of devotional service and what Prabhupada describes as trickery. The pure devotee, we come in the beginning to get relieved from all our suffering. But gradually we learn that our only suffering, again, as Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj said, is forgetfulness of Krishna. So as soon as we remember Krishna, our position with Krishna, then everything is okay. And then there's no more suffering. We realize wherever we are. So pure devotee, I don't care. I'm in heaven, I'm in hell. I just want to serve Krishna. But in the beginning, whatever it is you want to accept, to go to Krishna for satisfying your needs, that's much better than thinking Krishna doesn't exist, there is no God. Why am I suffering? Why is this person, as you said, why is one person going to the university, gets a very good job, makes millions of dollars, the other person worked just as hard, he's not getting anything, he's starving, he's hungry.
Thank you, Maharaj. George Amega has posted his question. He said, please, in a situation whereby at point of delivery, whereby the two cannot survive, I mean either the baby or the mother, and there is need to do away with one life as a devotee, what do we do? And this is in relation to anti-abortion law passed yesterday by Argentinian government. When a mother is delivering and there's danger, one of them must die. As a devotee, what do we do? It's his question.
That's one of those. That's one of those questions. That's one of those questions. And can God make something so heavy he can't lift it? Kind of a question. That's a decision for the person. There's one letter from Jai Pataka asked a question to Srila Prabhupada asking about contraception and abortion. And Prabhupada said, this is not our business. Our business is to give everyone Krishna, and each of us have to make our choices ultimately. There's no, to put the responsibility on another person. Of course, that isn't fair. We have people ask us here in Vrindavan, so is COVID there in Vrindavan? Should I come to Vrindavan or should I not come to Vrindavan? Is it safe there? I don't know. You come to Vrindavan, you don't come to Vrindavan. It's not for me to decide. This is mother and child. They have very close connection, even the child's in the womb. So that's the responsibility to figure out. We also can understand that just because somebody says one person's going to live, the other one's automatically going to die. That also is just not a guarantee, because you never know. Everything is up to Krishna ultimately. So in that sense, if one has faith, of course, they'll try to save the child and say whatever Krishna wants. But again, that's not a decision for me to make. Just like we saw Bhakti Churu Maharaj, who recently left. He left India. He decided he was going to go and preach. He wasn't going to let this COVID stop him from his preaching work. So he went to the US and he somehow or other contracted COVID. And when they said, should you go on the ventilator? You want to go on the ventilator, not go on the ventilator? What did he say? He left it up to his godbrothers to decide. And they made a decision. So that was his decision. So they made a decision, you go into the hospital, you go on a ventilator, and what happened? A week later, he was gone. Ultimately, we understand, Prabhupada tells us so many things. He said, from the moment you're born, you have so many breaths. He said, this is why the yogis in the Himalayas, what their whole process is, they want to live hundreds and hundreds of years. So they slow down their breath. And in this way, that instead of 100 years, they could live hundreds of years. He also says, you come into this world, whatever money you're going to make, it's already decided when you're taking birth. He says, you can decide how you want to make that money. That decision is there. You do it this way or that way, you're going to make so much money. Doesn't matter. He said, but what you're going to get, that's already established from your last birth. He said, you can't change that. The only thing we can do is become Krishna conscious. That's the one thing that we can adjust. But still, whatever you're fated to get, that you'll get. And then if Krishna wants to change it, he can change it. I know one devotee in the US, in Seattle, Washington. He had many businesses. We call this UPS stores. So they're like stores you go to and ship your things. UPS is a big shipping company here in the US. So these stores, you can buy all your supplies, buy the wrapping paper, buy the bubble wrap, ship your things. So he had a half a dozen of these stores. So then this whole COVID came. So of course it changed everything. I called him up last month. I said, well, how are your stores doing? He said, oh, I did really well. He said, I sold them all just before this epidemic happened. Somebody bought all the stores. He said, and then with that money, I bought some land. He said, and now I'm doing very well with the land. So see, these things, they're already settled. So some person could stick with what they have, stick with their business. So many businesses have closed during this pandemic, but so many other people have made even more money during this. We see that as well. So all these things are just going on automatically. Now this situation with life or death, Prabhupada also answered some questions. They said when heart transplant is there, of course, Prabhupada said, doesn't matter. If you're going to live, it's up to Krishna. We know if Krishna wants to kill you, no one can save you. Krishna wants to say, he told me this personally as well. Krishna wants to save you, no one can kill you. He said, so whatever happens, see, this is devotee. He understands Krishna's in control. So whatever he does with complete faith and peacefulness. And devotee's peaceful. Whether he lives or dies, doesn't matter. Prabhupada also, he showed us so many things. Whenever Prabhupada thought he was leaving, what did he do? Who can answer? Whenever Prabhupada became ill, he thought he might be leaving, what did he do? Maharaj, you know what he did?
Kirtan.
Yes, he came to Vrindavan.
Yes.
When he thought the time of death may be there, Prabhupada came to Vrindavan. He did it in 1967, did it in 1970, did it in 1974. He wanted to leave in Vrindavan. And then when it was in Vrindavan, what did he do? He said, I'm going to go out and preach. So this is devotee. All these desires, just like you have desire, I have desires. The pure devotee also has his desires. He's a person. So simultaneously, different desires can be there. But this business, ultimately, it's always up to the person to decide what they want to do. No one can make decision for you. It's not our business. Our business is just to preach Krishna consciousness, encourage people in their Krishna consciousness, so that we can decide what we should do. Who can understand, except for a pure devotee, who can understand what level someone is on? Therefore, we see everyone as pure devotee. We don't make judgments on people. That's bad. That's not good business, criticizing others, trying to judge others. But I will tell you one other thing. If we have a few minutes, here in Vrindavan, very young girl, just 12 years old, she was dying of leukemia here in Vrindavan. So the mother came, took her into Prabhupada's room. And of course, she was hoping Prabhupada would give some compassion, words of encouragement. And Prabhupada, he saw things he could see everyone, and he saw things on transcendental level. He didn't deviate from that. And he said to them, we're all going to die today or tomorrow. All of us. Why do you think, all of us here, why do you think you're going to be here tomorrow? As we see now, anything can happen. Anything can happen. We could all be gone in no time. The important thing is to become Krishna conscious. So he encouraged her. It's very fortunate. The person that knows death is upon them, they're most fortunate person, because whatever time they have left, they can use to completely absorb themselves. So Prabhupada was never had sentimental, mundane sentiment. Prabhupada was always on the transcendental platform. So even in that situation, as I mentioned before, he never tried to solve material problems with a material solution. He always just gave Krishna. Give Krishna. That's all we can do is give Krishna. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Maharaj, for your wonderful class.
Hey.
Any other question or comments? You can please unmute and ask. Maharaj, I don't know how long do you have for us or to take more questions?
If someone has a question, we can do it. We can do one more question.
Okay. Can I pull you unmute yourself? You have a question? It's not there. Okay. Maharaj, you want to bless us?
You have Prabhupada's blessings, all of you. I saw Prabhupada's eagerness to go to your continent there in Africa. I was so eager for many years, like I say, from 1975. I've been eager to go to places I didn't go to with Prabhupada so that I could see where he went and what his desires were. And I went to Russia. When I joined Prabhupada, it was just going to Russia when I joined in 1971. So I didn't get to go there until 2007, the first time. And I saw there that Prabhupada going there, spending 1 week there, everyone that came, see, I have a very certain way I see how Prabhupada made devotees. And I see just by Prabhupada going somewhere and walking as he did on Red Square, he made devotees. He had birds and bees that could hear him chanting. Maybe he stepped on little ants and this and that. It wasn't just that he preached. The pure devotee, everywhere he goes, he turns it into a holy place. Huh? He turns it into a, what's it called? Yes. Anyway, it becomes a tirtha. Huh? Just like we have tirtha. A tirtha here is because saintly persons go there, because the Krishna goes there, his incarnations go there, the pure devotees go there. That's what makes a person, that's what makes a place a tirtha. So Prabhupada went all around the world so many times, turning mundane places into tirthas. So I saw how he did that in Russia. So just last year, I got to see how he did that in Africa. Everywhere he went, there's a temple now. Every place he went, there's a temple and a preaching center, and thousands of you people have become devotees all around. Whatever bodies, black bodies, Indian bodies, white bodies. And Prabhupada went there specifically to see African people become devotees. That was his desire. He became upset when he went to the temple and it was nothing but Indians in it. And he said, where are the local people? He said, have them come. There was a lecture he gave. He said, invite them in. Prabhupada didn't see this. Prabhupada came to destroy this class consciousness that is still very, very strong everywhere in this world. It's still strong here in Vrindavan, strong here all over in India. Prabhupada wrote one letter and he said, Indians, he said, they're the tannery experts. You know what a tannery is? I'll tell you, a tannery, tanning is what they do to skin. It's called a tannery. It's where they process leather. That's a tannery. So Prabhupada said, Indians are the tannery experts. So what he was saying was no one sees bodily consciousness more than Indians, how they can judge people just by their skin, just by the color of the skin. And I say that not to be critical of anyone, but this is what it's like in the material world. Everyone's busy judging people based on their birth, based on the country they come from, based on the color of their skin. Prabhupada's business, as he traveled around for 10 years, 14 times around the world, was to eliminate this most abominable activity he opened up by Lord Chaitanya to give Krishna to everyone. And when I was in Africa, I was so eager to go to a temple. It wasn't just filled with Indians, and I never got the opportunity to do it. I was actually very upset that I tried to arrange when we were in Santon. Yeah, I wanted to go to Soweto Temple just to see local people as devotees and just to get their association. Somehow or other, it didn't happen. And that was a little disappointing to me. But as we were there, the thing we found most pleasing was talking to the local devotees, the local population, and seeing their eagerness in Krishna consciousness. So anyway, today I'm very happy and I'm very humbled to have the opportunity to be with all of you. And just our business is we never let anything discourage us in our endeavor to become Krishna conscious. You have very wonderful devotees there to help you. I see Maharaj here, one of my very favorite devotees. All of Bhakti Tirtha Swami's disciples. I see so many of them. They're very special. They're very saintly, and they understand. Maharaj has given them a lot of love, and I see them also giving a lot of love to others. So yeah, you certainly have all my blessings to engage in Prabhupada's society, to do service and be Krishna conscious and bring Krishna consciousness to others. This is what is the most pleasing to Prabhupada. So if you want blessings, is all you got to do is give Krishna to everyone you meet, and you'll get all of Prabhupada's blessings. So that's my New Year's desire for all of you and for myself as well. So, Prabhupada ki jai.
Srutakirti Prabhu ki.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you very much for the wonderful lecture.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very happy to see you. I'm feeling in Vrindavan.
Yes. Come back to Vrindavan.
Thank you.
Well, you stay there, you travel everywhere there and give Krishna to everyone. I see very beautiful devotees here on the screen. Everyone looks very beautiful.
Yes, you will come here to West Africa.
Yes, I would love to. I really want to. I want to more and more.
So we ask all devotees to kindly unmute yourselves and let's chant Hare Krishna for Prabhu for coming.
Aye.
Hare
Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare
Krishna,
Hare,
Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Hare.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
So we ask all devotees to kindly unmute yourselves.
Hare
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Krishna,
Hare,
Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare
Rama
Rama,
Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Hare.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. Krishna Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Krishna,
Hare,
Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Mukunda Madhu Yadav